Hi, it's Christina with the Sisyphean Journal. Today's July 9th, and every abortion death is a really sad death, but this story is particularly heartbreaking because of what a hard life this young woman had already led, and how what she thought was going to be a difficult path to being reunited with her children turned out to be exactly the opposite. Lupe Negron was 33 years old. She'd come to the United States with her husband in the late 1980s. They left their three young sons with Lupe's mother in Honduras, planning to send for them as soon as they earned enough money. Lupe and Hermenio sold flowers and ice cream from a cart on a street corner. The need to earn money became even more urgent after Lupe's mother died. So, Lupe and Hermenio continued to work hard, and they welcomed the children's new little brother, Byron, into the world. Times got even tougher that summer of 1993. On the 4th of July, a passerby tossed a firecracker into their dwelling and gutted it. They lost everything they owned. Neighbors gave the family used clothing and furniture to help them set up a new home. They loved the big lady with the even bigger smile who would sometimes give children their treats for free. Now, things seemed to be looking up. Lupe got the opportunity to work through Calvary Hospital as a home care aide for a neighbor with cancer. But there's only one problem. Lupe was 5 months pregnant, and she feared that she would not be able to get certified as a caregiver if she was pregnant. Now, we'll get to this later, but pro-choice activists, should they have been pounding into Lupe's head, abortion is free and is cheap, readily available, and paid for with state funds? Or should they say pregnancy discrimination is against the law, they cannot refuse to certify you just because you're pregnant? We'll see further on what their thoughts were on that. So, Lupe obviously felt terribly torn. Her niece, Helena, told Newsday she didn't believe in abortion. She knew it was a sin what she was doing, but she didn't want to lose a job. It was a necessity. So again, the whole idea that this is a free choice, that Guadalupe was celebrating and exercising her right to choose, it looks more like, to me, an act of absolute desperation. This woman wants to care for her children so badly that she is taking on this horrible moral and spiritual burden just to try to help her children. And I don't understand why putting her in that situation is celebrated, and why the response wouldn't be, okay, let's let you know that they can't refuse to give you this job just because you're pregnant. And what's more, maybe we can help Hermenio get an even better job than just selling ice cream. No. Abortion will fix everything. Abortion will refurnish your apartment. Abortion will bring those kids to the U.S. from Honduras. I don't understand why people think the pro-choice movement is helpful to women in Lupe's situation. Now, Lupe did not discuss the situation with Hermenio, her relatives later said, because she knew he'd talk her out of aborting the baby. So she told Hermenio that she was sick that day and was going to stay home, so Hermenio took 4-year-old Byron with him and started work. So Helena drove her aunt to Metro Women's Center on Roosevelt Avenue in Queens on July 9, 1993. Now, Lupe had no doubt Lupe had no doubt concerns about her spiritual well-being. Helena made that pretty clear. But she was confident about her physical well-being. Helena said she wasn't in any fear because they told her there wasn't any risk. And again, this is something we get again and again and again from the abortion rights movement. Oh, safer than a shot of penicillin, safer than a tonsillectomy. They practically tell you that you should get pregnant and have an abortion because it's the safest thing in the world to do. This false sense of security they give women, that you don't need to vet these clinics. Are they safe and legal? Of course they're safe. Lupe might have felt differently if she had known about the 56-year-old doctor who was about to take her life into his hands. But Metro Women's Center would not even tell Lupe and Helena the doctor's name. And what's more, they did not tell Lupe and Helena that Metro Women's Center wasn't even a clinic. Wait, I thought pro-choice people were supposed to lose their minds over fake clinics. Fake clinics are bad. Fake clinics endanger women. Oh, but if you're a fake clinic but you do abortions, that's fine. Yeah, you pass yourself off as a clinic, but you're not licensed and inspected. No problem. They don't have a problem with that. Well, let's learn a little bit about this doctor. Iranian-born Dr. Elias Bonrohi came to the U.S. in 1982. He failed his certification test 3 times before he was able to become certified as an OBGYN. In 1986, while practicing under his original name in upstate New York, his license had been revoked for 47 incidents of misconduct, including performing surgeries and deliveries in his office rather than a hospital, and for performing an unnecessary hysterectomy. He insisted to the medical board, "Every patient I deal with, I deal like she is my sister." If that's the case, I think he and his family would be pretty much estranged. One woman described her ordeal to the medical board. "He started cutting me after that, and he just kept cutting me and taking pieces out of me and showing them to me and everything. The numbness wore off and I was screaming. Then he got scared because there was so much blood coming out. He called the nurse, so she got tissues and stuff, and he just stuffed me with cloth on the inside and packed it in there. Then he sewed it right in me." She ended up hospitalized and required 8 surgeries to repair the damage. And, his fellow physicians testified against him. But in spite of the evidence against him, he challenged the revocation, got it reduced to a 3-month suspension, and then changed his name to Dr. David Benjamin and relocated to Queens. And just 2 weeks before Lupe walked into Metro Women's Center, pretending to be a clinic when it wasn't, it was just a doctor's office, not registered with the state, not inspected, he was still practicing while he was appealing the case. So Lupe paid $800 for the abortion. That's about $1,600 in 2020. Now, abortions at Lupe's stage of pregnancy were typically performed in a 2-day procedure in order to dilate the cervix enough to safely get the fetus out. But Benjamin decided to just treat it as a 1-day procedure. And he also took no steps to address Lupe's high blood pressure. A receptionist at the facility noted that Benjamin performed the abortion at 10 a.m. and moved Lupe to recovery, and then she was left unattended with no monitoring equipment for over an hour. Meanwhile, Helena sat in the waiting room hoping all was well with her aunt. Sometime after noon, she saw Lupe, pale, bleeding, spitting up blood, and clearly in pain, being wheeled out on a stretcher. Benjamin said that there had been complications and wheeled Lupe into an exam room. Shortly afterward, Benjamin's wife, Jackie, who was his assistant, came out of the exam room screaming, oh my God, and call the ambulance, call the ambulance." But it took them until 1:40 p.m. to actually call the ambulance. And what the medics saw when they got to that clinic, they were flabbergasted. Medic Freddie Noboa described the clinic as filthy, disgusting, and not even looking like a doctor's office. He and his partner found Lupe naked and bloody, still in the stirrups without even a sheet to cover her. A nurse was screaming. That actually wasn't a nurse. Noboa just took her for a nurse. Screaming and trying to revive her in a small, unventilated room. None of the normal emergency equipment was there. There was no blood pressure cuff, no EKG monitor. He had one tiny cylinder of oxygen about 8 inches long. He said it had run out, Noboa said. Oh my gosh, not having emergency equipment on hand. Oh, that never happens. Never. We haven't had other abortion deaths where that happens, has we? No, not a problem. These fake clinics are fully equipped. And of course, staffed by people who know what they're doing, right? Wrong. The medics noticed one other thing. Benjamin had inserted the breathing tube into Lupe's stomach instead of into her lungs. So instead of getting air into her lungs, the stuff in her stomach was coming up into the mask and then going down into her lungs. So Freddie Noboa said that even if Lupe hadn't bled to death, She could have drowned in her own fluids due to the botched tube placement. Oh my gosh, where have we seen things like this before? Oh yeah, that Planned Parenthood where the patient stopped breathing and they were inflating her stomach and performing chest compressions on her abdomen. Safe and legal, safe and legal. Oh, it's ever so safe. They know what they're doing. Trust them. There's no risk. No risk. The paramedics indicated they were hindered in their attempts to save Lupe's life because Benjamin lied to them about the nature of her problem. The emergency call, in fact, had only been for a patient with difficulty breathing. Freddie Noboa said, "We got there within 5 minutes, but she was already dead on the table. Her pupils were fully dilated." Both Benjamin and his wife appeared panic-stricken. "I told the doctor, get out of here. You're doing everything wrong. Get out of my way." Meanwhile, I could hear someone screaming in the background, which was the nurse. At first, I thought it was a family member because of the way she was jumping up and down and screaming. I said, "Ma'am, you've got to get out of here." And the disgusted paramedic said that there wasn't an anesthesiologist present. Gosh, where have we seen that before? Oh yeah, we had that guy who had a hand holder administering general anesthesia. And we had that guy in Oklahoma whose janitor was administering anesthesia. At least they had somebody administering anesthesia. Sure, it was a hand holder. Sure, it was a janitor. But in this case, it was nobody. Gosh. And Benjamin also refused to tell the medics his name and said that Lupe was unconscious due to too much anesthesia. So Freddie and his partner removed the face mask and the misplaced tube, properly intubated the patient, and transported her to a hospital where they tried for another hour to revive her, but she was dead. Now, Dr. Benjamin told Lupe's distraught family that she died from a heart attack, but the autopsy report found otherwise. In trying to extract the 20-week fetus without having properly dilated Lupe's cervix, Benjamin had lacerated her cervix and ripped a 3-inch hole in her uterus. She hemorrhaged and went into shock and cardiac arrest, and authorities determined that Benjamin had initiated this risky procedure without even having examined his patient first. He was indicted for second-degree murder for depraved indifference murder, second-degree manslaughter, criminally negligent homicide, and tampering with evidence. Now, contrary to news coverage at the time, Benjamin was not the first case in New York history of a doctor being charged with murder for performing a legal procedure. That, as far as I know, was Jesse Ketchum, who performed a fatal abortion on Margaret Louise Smith in 1971. So, slashing up a woman's insides and letting her bleed out, even if you're doing it safely and legally, can still be frowned upon. It's not routinely frowned upon, but it can be. Benjamin sobbed and pleaded during a hearing to have his bail reduced, but the judge instead raised it to $1 million. And his family members screamed, "Oh my God," and raised such an outcry that they were escorted from the courtroom. Now, he was offered a chance to plead guilty to second-degree manslaughter, which would have resulted in a sentence of 3 to 9 years, but he chose instead to go to court. He was convicted of murder and sentenced to 25 to life. And his appeal was granted on the grounds that being a doctor does not give you the right to treat your patients with depraved indifference. It might, according to abortion rights activists who, when Bruce Steer did that to Sharon Hampton, started a defense fund for him. But, you know, different strokes for different folks. Some people still think that callously letting your abortion patient bleed to death still helps women. So, it was after Lupe's death that reporters from Newsday noted that the city of New York had all the regulations in place they needed to shut down Metro Women's Center. Shortly after abortion on demand had been legalized in New York in 1970, the city had put regulations on the books to cover facilities that performed abortions, whether or not they were actually licensed clinics. But evidently, officials did very little by the way of enforcing the regulations. Gosh, have we seen that before? Second. Kermit, come on, not the frog, Kermit, Gosnell, that was it. That was one where they failed to actually enforce the regulations. Not one abortion facility as of 1993 had ever been closed by the city for substandard condition. Okay, so like the bulk of abortion facilities in New York City at the time, Metro Women's Center was not a licensed clinic and not regulated by the state. It was actually a fake clinic. But no problem, they do abortions so they can be a fake clinic. So in the aftermath of Lupe's death, instead of calling for the city to actually begin inspecting the facilities and closing down the dangerous ones, New York City Comptroller Elizabeth Holtzman instead demanded that the city's hospitals speed up the wait time to have abortions on their premises. And Alexander Sanger, head of Planned Parenthood of New York, faulted the state not with failing to shut Metro Women's Center down, but with failing to advertise that abortions were legal and that the state would pay for them. So if New York taxpayers gave Dr. Benjamin the $800, then Lupe would have been okay. Yeah, I follow that logic. Now, at first, Lupe's widower lay abed in shock after being informed of his wife's death, and family and friends gathered to support him. The neighbors who had recently contributed clothing and furniture to help him rebuild his home were now raising money so he could send his wife's body back to Honduras for burial. "All I want is justice," he told Newsday, "and I need help to get my kids here from Honduras." But 3 weeks later, Herminio filed suit against the doctor in the clinic as well as against the state for not having shut the fake clinic down after the doctor showed that he was a clear risk to the public. But an appellate court decided that it was okay for state officials to let Benjamin do what he was doing and let Metro Women's Center run a filthy place like they did, just like the authorities in Pennsylvania in the 21st century. Those officials didn't do anything wrong legally when they let Kermit Gosnell do what he was doing. So, hey, all you lovers of Roe versus Wade, this is what's good enough, right? This is what the abortion lobby pushes for. Not for closing these places down. No, we don't want regulations. We don't want the state looking in. Don't touch it, don't touch it, don't touch it. Just advertise that abortion is safe, legal, readily available, and have the taxpayers foot the bill. And that'll fix everything. Yeah.